Thank you for tuning back into this fourth tutorial in the Python programming series. Let's jump straight back into the task from the last episode. I asked you to make a program which subtracts two numbers and outputs the result and outputs the original two numbers. So here was my solution to that program using what we've already done. This isn't the best solution to the problem, and I'll be showing you how to improve this as we create a new program in this video. But it gets the job done, so if I run module, I'll save it. And now if I enter two numbers, let's do 10 and 6. The result is 4, yeah, the number 6 was subtracted from number 10, so I just let the user know, first of all, which number I'd be subtracting from which, just because otherwise they wouldn't know which way around they had to enter their numbers. Again, this is just a program we're using to teach programming to ourselves, but it's always good to think about the end user if you eventually take your programming to a higher level and a further place. So let's just recap over this program. We take the two inputs by assigning the values of the inputs to variables, and we're making sure that Python converts the input to an integer so we can subtract them and then output them. Now, there's several ways to clean up this program, and I'm going to do this by expanding the program a little bit first. We're going to make it into a very, very simple calculator. And when I say very simple, it will just take two numbers and it will give you the sum of them, the product, the difference, and the quotient, if that's, I think that's what it's called when you divide two numbers. Anyway, let's just save this as lesson 4. Let's call this calculator. And there's a few little tricks that you can use in Python that help make your programs better and easier to follow. So first of all, let's just change what we output first to reflect the program. So we'll say enter two numbers. In fact, let's just have the first line saying welcome to our calculator. It's always nice to have a friendly program introducing itself. It will then say enter two numbers, and we take the two numbers, and what we want to do is output all of the different processing we can do on it, so add, subtract, divide, and multiply. We'll again use separate variables for the results of each processing task. So let's have a variable called sum. Now, bear this in mind. You see sum has gone pink, as I explained in the previous video. That means it's a command in its own right, so we can't use that as a variable name. So let's say num sum. Okay, that's a better name. That's black, so we can use that as a variable name. Then we'll have num diff for the difference, and I can just copy and paste that and make sure I set the sum to with the plus sign in the middle. And just a little thing to note, like I said previously, blank lines aren't a problem in Python. It just skips them and goes on to the next line. These spaces between variables and equal signs and plus signs don't matter. It would work perfectly fine if the line of code was like this. It's just up to personal preference as to how the code itself looks, that I'm just putting spaces in between. And let's just do the last two variables, num prod, and then I'll paste this in. You may be thinking, where's the multiplication symbol on my keyboard? Do I just do an X? No, don't do an X. Python will think that's the name of a variable. It's actually the star symbol that represents multiplication. So on my keyboard, that is above the 8 key, so holding shift and pressing 8 gives you that. And then num quo, and then we'll just divide number by number 2. Again, there's no division symbol on the keyboard. For division, we use a /. And now we can output the results. And there's a few little things that will neaten up the program here. So like we did before, we can add text and variables together on a single print line so they output on the same line. But we've got to be careful here, since these variables are all integers. You can't add strings and integers. So what we're actually going to do is, once we've carried out the processing on the integers, we're going to convert them back into their string versions so that we can print them on the same line as text. So hopefully that will make sense when I show you how I'm doing it. So let's just get rid of these print commands. We'll just output the two numbers and the sign that we're carrying out, and then giving the result. So we're going to show what's going on with the two numbers. So we'll output number Then we'll output a string with the plus symbol and spaces on either side. Then number 2. Then we'll output another string with equals. Make sure I don't forget the pluses between each string that is part of this print command. So number plus this string plus number 2 plus this string, and then we will output numSum. So that's the result that we've processed. Again, we don't need this variable numSum. I could remove this line, and instead here I could just put in brackets number plus number 2, but often it's neater to carry out the processing elsewhere in the program. Now this is the basis of the command, but as I said, you can't add integers and strings, so we need to convert the integers back into strings. So just like we converted the inputs to integers here, around each variable we need to convert it back to a string. So we use str, you'll see it goes purple, so that's the command, and then you must put the variable within the brackets. So we need to do that for all of this and this bit on the end. So this will work now. Seeing as we did the processing earlier, I'll put it back to numSum. I don't need so many brackets here. I just need a bracket to end and close the print statement, and brackets around the variable that I'm converting to a string. Okay, and now we can just copy and paste this line and just change the necessary parts for each of the different operations. So subtract, and seeing as we're outputting text, we can actually put an X there because it's just printing that, and the user of the program, if we were giving this away, wouldn't have to look at the code. They just use the program and they'd see X and they'd think, oh, it's a multiplication symbol. For this, you can try and find a symbol that looks like a division. Maybe that kind of looks like a division. I don't know. You might want to say divided by, but I'll just leave it as that for now. There might be an ASCII symbol for divide, so you might want to get that symbol and paste it in here. And then we're just going to change the variables that are output after the equal sign. So numDiff, numProd, and numQuo. So if we run this now, this is similar to the task I set you last time, but it's a lot neater in the way it outputs the results. So let's do 15 and 3, and you see the program actually outputs the lines. So 15 plus 3 is 18, and these are all correct with their outputs. So the key thing to mention is converting the data types of the different variables. This is a very Python specific thing, so in other languages they handle data types differently, but as long as you understand the key concepts of what the data types are. Previously we could just use a command saying print number like this, and it would be fine because it just prints the integer out on screen, and Python doesn't have a problem with that. So let's show you that now. So you see it's just printing number here, 15, and it would be happy printing number plus number 2 because it just works out the sum of these two integers and then outputs the integer. But we couldn't add a string on. So let's say hello, that's a string, or we could have a variable that is a string. If I run this now, 15 and 3, you see we get an error because it can't add an integer and a string. So that pretty much wraps this up, but there's one last little trick I can show you. This whole time we've needed these brackets on the end of input, and the reason is within these brackets you can actually put text, and that will be printed on the screen, and the user will input their input on the end of the text. So it's basically just a prompt letting them know what the input is for. So instead of having to print the line, we're going to enter two numbers and then taking inputs on separate lines, you can actually take this text here and put it inside the input bracket. So you don't need anything within the brackets of input. Like, it's worked perfectly fine before, and it looks like I missed here. Let's just cut this and put it within the brackets of the input. There, that's better. Now if we run it, you'll see, welcome to our calculator, enter two numbers, and when I'm typing the first number, instead of it being on the next line, it's actually on the same line as the text, because there is a prompt within the input command. And you might want to put a space at the end of the prompt, so there's a gap between the text and when you input, so that just makes it a little bit neater. But that concludes this video where we have made our first simple little calculator program. Hopefully if you're new to programming, you feel like you've made some progress here, and hopefully you understand all of this program. If you don't worry. Just try and follow along and you'll pick it up as you go. If you ever have problems or errors, just leave me a comment and I'll try and help you out. If not, just make sure that the program that you've written down is exactly the same as the text that I've written in here, and that way you shouldn't get any errors. It's fine to experiment, try things out yourself, make your own little programs, but if things aren't going well, just stick to the code here and then it should work and you should pick it up as you go along. Now, the programs we've been writing so far have been linear in their structure. Now, what I mean by this is the program just executes each line from the top in sequence. So it does the first line, second line, third line, fourth line. It just executes them each. If it gets a blank line, it doesn't do anything. If it gets an instruction, it carries it out. But we can use various constructs in programming to change the order in which programs are executed, and this can lead to much more potential within the programs that you actually write, and you'll see this when we start off by using the if command in the next tutorial. And that concludes this video. Thank you for watching. Make sure to subscribe to stay tuned for future videos in this series. And this video's throwback section is all about Mirror City. This was actually the second animation that I ever uploaded. This was a major step forward from the jelly one, which was 12 seconds. This is an 18-second epic. It's another Blender animation. I was actually following a tutorial on Blender on YouTube, and this guy showed how to make this kind of cool mirror city thing. It doesn't look completely like a city, it's more a sort of artistic thing, but I was kind of proud of it. And it got around twice as many views as the jelly one, so people like these epically long videos. So click here if you want to check that out and maybe explore around my old videos if you're interested. If not, just stay tuned for future Python videos. Thank you for watching.